Thank you, Brother Nelson. Good evening, Bhantes. Good evening, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. And with Bhante's permission, I shall commence this evening's sharing. The topic is abandoning the five hindrances. Now, it's very important to realize that if we want to meditate successfully, it's very important that the first thing we really have to accomplish is to be able to abandon the five hindrances to achieve the goal. If we're not able to abandon the five hindrances during the process of the meditation, we will not be able to progress much further, because these five hindrances will come to disturb us, disturb the mind, disturb the body, and make us very uncomfortable. There's also one misunderstanding a lot of people think about, the five hindrances is only pertaining to meditation. It is talked a lot about in meditation, but the five hindrances also applies to our daily life. When we live our life, we are also constantly disturbed by the five hindrances. So in order to understand the five hindrances, it's very important to do two things. First is to understand what it does to us in the mind. So it's the understanding of the mental processes that is an important thing to understand. But the second one is, whenever I do any sharing on these things, we always go back to the root of the Buddha's teaching. So the root of the Buddha's teaching actually stems from the very first sermon, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, where the Buddha pointed out that there is dukkha. And dukkha is commonly translated as suffering. But actually dukkha can also mean stress and discomfort, dissatisfactoriness and distress, which is mental suffering. So it's not just suffering, because the word suffering sounds very serious. Some people think, suffering, that means somebody died, It is not that serious. Dukkha actually can even be the slightest dissatisfactoriness we feel. We're getting something we don't like. That is dukkha. When we don't like it and we express it, then we are expressing the reaction as a result of the dukkha. So the Buddha pointed out that there are four noble truths, four supernormal realities that we have to understand. That there is dukkha, there is the origin of dukkha, there is an end to dukkha, so that means we are able to bring it to an ending, and then of course there is the way leading to the ending on the cessation of dukkha. I won't go too deep into the four noble truths, but the first two are very important for us to understand before we go into talking about the five hindrances. So the first one I'm going to take a look at is basically the Buddha mentioned that there are 8 kinds of suffering. Right? Birth, aging, sickness and death. Now these first 4 are very straightforward. I think everybody can understand that these 4 processes or these 4 activities in our life are filled with a lot of suffering. But then the next 3 are separation from what is pleasing is suffering, union with what is displeasing is suffering, and not to get what wants is suffering. Separation from what is pleasing simply means we have experienced something pleasant, enjoyable, comfortable, nice, happy, and then we no longer have it. So that is the separation from something that is pleasing. Union with what is displeasing means we have experienced something uncomfortable, discomfort, something that makes us unhappy, something that makes us sad, something that makes us angry or whatever, and we are stuck with it. That is union with what is displeasing. So that is also suffering. The third one is that we may have some ambition, some desires, some wishes for progress in life, progress in business, improvement in our business, or promotion in our job, or having a married couple having babies, but they are unable to conceive and things like that. So if they wish for something and they don't get it, that is also suffering. And these 3 kinds of suffering are also quite simple to understand, that it is happening to us throughout the day. But it is the number 8 which a lot of people actually fail to comprehend enough, because it is this number 8 that really is the root cause of all the suffering, and that is the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. called Panchupadana Kanda. Now, the five aggregates is really the process of perception. Everything we see, hear, smell, taste and touch, then a perception arises in the mind. When we have the perception of what we have seen, heard, smelled, taste or touch, and we cling on to it, we hold on to it, we are attached to it, that leads us to endless kinds of suffering as a result of that. In fact, that is the root cause of all these other suffering there. So this number 8 is very important to understand, that everything we see, everything we hear, we smell, we taste or we touch, there is a feeling associated with it, and then we react to this feeling. That is the clinging on to it, the reaction to it. You react to it because you personalize it. Oh, you say, I am affected by it, so I react to it. If it is something pleasant, oh, I want more of it. If it is something unpleasant, I want to get rid of it. So this is really what is happening there. Now, in order to understand how five hindrances affect us and a little bit further understanding of suffering, it is important to understand the activity of the mind. A lot of people think the mind is something that exists. Now, when we ask people, where is your mind? Where do people point? Most people point up here. What are you pointing to? You're not pointing to your mind. You are pointing to your brain. The brain exists. The brain is an organ. It is there. The brain cells are exchanging chemicals and electricity. So between these electrochemical activities, there is an activity going on inside the brain. And it is this activity in the brain and also in the entire body which actually gives rise to the process, that experience we call mind. So mind is really an activity. Mind is not an entity. Entity means something that exists, something you can hold on to, you can see, you can hear, you can touch it, you can feel it. That is an entity. But the mind is an activity. Activity means it's something ongoing, which the only way you can understand what is an activity is to experience it. And it's amazing. Scientists are today trying to map the brain to see the activity in the brain, what is happening to it and how people think. So in other words, they are trying to correlate activity in the brain with the mind, the mental processes going on. In doing so, they are also trying to create a framework of what the mind is like. And the amazing thing is what the neuroscientists are arriving at today, the framework of what the mind is like, is exactly what the Buddha spoke about nearly 2,600 years ago. So what did the Buddha say about the mind? He described the mind as an activity, and the only way we can understand activity is to experience it. So there are three parts of this mental experience going on. The first experience, or the first part of this mental experience, the Buddha calls vijnana. Vijnana basically is the process of perception. That means when we see, hear, smell, taste or touch something, a perception arises in the mind. I see this thing, I see this brother, I see that chair, I see the camera, and so on. So you see, hear, smell or taste something, and a mental image arises, and you now realize you've seen something. So that is vijnana, the perception that arises. It's a big picture of what you have perceived with your sense organs. So it's basically what we perceive through our sense organs. So whenever the eyes open and light enters the eye, it triggers activity in the brain, and then we have this experience of, oh, I see something. Seeing colors, right? And then basically that is what we are seeing, this perception. Now, along with this arising of a perception, there is also a process that arises at the same time called mano, and this is the cognitive process. Cognitive process is responsible for two major functions, cognition and conception. Cognition basically means that it is able to interpret what was perceived through the sense organs. So it is categorized interpretation of the perception by giving meaning to what was perceived. What was perceived arises in the mind as a mental image. That is the rupa, the mental image of what you have seen or heard or smelled or tasted or touched. And that mental image is not just visual, but also can be sound. It can be the image of a sound. Somebody hits the piano and you hear the notes. That is also a mental image of sound. It's an audio image. It can also be the image of a smell. You smelled something and then you have a mental image. Oh, I smelled something. It's not visual, but it is actually an experience that the mind has experienced a smell, taste, or touch. And then Mano is then responsible for automatically interpreting it based on past experiences. I'm going to show you later on a flow chart, then you can understand this a little better. This process of interpretation is called papancha. Right? Papancha basically is a categorized interpretation of what was perceived by the sense organs. Unfortunately, the word papancha, now along the way I'm going to point out a lot of misunderstanding or inaccurate translations so that you can understand what I present better. The word papancha is often translated as mental proliferation. And if you ask psychologists what is mental proliferation, they will say it's rumination. That means the mind has run off and started thinking all kinds of stories and a whole lot of other things associated with it. Actually, that is not what papancha is. Papancha is simply interpretation in a categorized manner of what you have perceived. I'll come to that later on when we come to the flow chart. Now, everything we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch associated with it, there is some kind of a feeling, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. You touch something that is very hot, ooh, that is unpleasant. Right? You see very bright light shining at you, ooh, that's very unpleasant. If you see some soft, gentle light, that is very pleasant. So everything you see or hear or taste or touch has an associated with it as a feeling. Whether the feeling is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And that actually triggers a reaction in the mind, and that reaction is happening in this part of the mind called Citta, the affective process. That leads to a mood or a temperament. That means you feel good about it or you don't feel good about it. That is your mood. See, your mood is a reflection of how you feel, whether you feel nice or happy about it or you are unhappy about it. So basically what the Citta does, there are two things it does. First, it is reacting to the feeling, pleasant or unpleasant. This reaction is called tanha, emotional reaction. Right? So emotional reaction is tanha, this reaction from the excitement of pleasant or unpleasant feelings. And feeling is the Vedana. This feeling is a raw feeling of the sensory object that you have just encountered. It is not really the deeper meaning of emotional feeling, but just initial feeling. Like for example, a hot surface, the feeling is, oh, it's painful. Right? Bright light, that is disturbing. Loud sound, screeching sound, oh, that is hurtful. On the other hand, if you touch something furry object like a dog, the nice fur of the cat, ooh, that is very pleasant, right? Or you hear some soothing music, very pleasant. So the pleasantness or unpleasantness, right? And the Citta reacts to it. This reaction is called tanha. Now, unfortunately, the word tanha has been translated as craving. So craving, it does reflect a part of it is craving, but craving does not adequately explain what it is. The real meaning of tanha is emotional reaction. You react to it, and this all comes from your Citta. And this is what five hindrances will do to you. Five hindrances will trigger this reaction, trigger your reaction to it, because five hindrances basically is unpleasant throughout mostly. Right? Even some pleasant sensations, pleasant memories in five hindrances will also trigger this reaction. Apart from this reaction, right, there is also one more thing that happens in Citta. We tend to personalize everything we experience. And this is what the Buddha was talking about. The five aggregates subject to clinging and subject to personalization. So the word upadana is often translated as clinging, grasping, or attachment. But a more precise translation of that word is personalizing. Meaning you say it's me or mine. That's subjective experience. The experience you feel inside. It is pleasant or unpleasant. Whatever it is you feel inside. It's mine. I feel it. I'll give you an example. You wake up in the morning. You knock your hand against the wall and it hurts. Right? So your hand hurts. What's the thought that comes to your mind? My hand hurts. What's the first word? My. Right? You walk down the street, you accidentally kick the lamppost and there is a pain in your toe. And then what's the thought that arises in your mind? Oh, my toe hurts. Right? My. Right? So every experience we have, when we feel it, we personalize it and call it I, me or mine. Everything, every time. You see your friend coming towards you. What's the thought that arises in your mind? Oh, my friend is coming. What's the first word? My friend. My. Right? And if you fall down and break your knee, then you feel a severe pain in the knee, and you say, oh, I feel the pain in my knee. What's the first word? I. So we always personalize every experience. Knowingly, unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, we automatically personalize it, because this is something that has happened over millions of years. It has actually it has evolved. It's part of the whole evolution process that makes us personalize every experience that affects the body or the mind. Right? So personalizing the experience leading to the notion, and because of this personalization leading to the notion that I am experiencing it, I'm experiencing this inside, this subjective experience inside. So we have this self-centered notion. Oh, there is a self-centered existence. Right? I exist because I am experiencing this. So the I, me or mine is so strong and so powerful. So now let's take a look at a flowchart of how the mind works. Mind is really a process. It's an experience, right? So it is the experience that is a chain reaction. It continuously happening. Activities in the environment, they stimulate our five senses. Our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and the body. And as a result of this stimulation, the five aggregates arises, or the process of perception arises, panchakanda, and then we begin to have a perception of, oh, I've seen something, I've heard something, I've touched something, I've smelled something, I've tasted something. So we are able to see, hear, smell, taste and touch. So this is the first process in the mind, the first experience that we are experiencing every time environmental activities stimulate our sense organs. Along with that arises the cognitive process, the mano. And the mano will try to interpret what was perceived through the sense organs by drawing on past memory. And this interpretation is called papancha. It refers to categorized memory of the past. Simple example. If I show you this, what is this? Bottle of mineral water. How do you know it is a bottle of mineral water? Because I just brought this here today. For those of you who were not with the retreat, you would not have seen this bottle. This is the first time you see this bottle. How do you know it's a bottle of mineral water? Because you have seen thousands of mineral water bottles before, and they look like that, similar. So what the mind does is, when we see something, we remember it, we put it into category. We never remember something precisely. We always remember something by categorizing it. Something that looks similar, we classify it together. I show you another one. For all of you, this is the first time you've seen this. What is this? A mouse. How do you know it's a mouse? You have seen hundreds of mouse before. Computer mouse. And you put it all into a category that looks something like that. So now you see something like that, you call it a mouse. If I change the color, I change the design, you will still call it a mouse, right? As long as it looks something similar to the mouse you have seen in the past. So that is really what's happening with papancha. Drawing from past memory to interpret what you have perceived through your sense organs, and then able to recognize this categorized identity. We're able to identify what it is. categorized identity that is giving it a meaning, giving it a name, nama, right? What you have perceived is in your mind is the rupa, and now you give it a name, is the nama. That is the categorized identity, recognition, and that's where the word recognition comes in. Now you realize the word recognition is really recognition. Recognition. Why re? Because it's repeated. What is repeated? It is repeated from your memory of the category. Right? Everything you see refers to categorized memory, and then you recognize what you have seen. Right? So that first part of this experience with Mano is identifying what is it, what is this, right, that you have experienced. But as I mentioned to you, everything you see, hear, smell, taste or touch, believe it or not, there is a feeling associated with it. Right? So at the same time, while light enters your eye, there is a feeling associated with it, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. Bright light is unpleasant. Dim light is pleasant. Red light usually is unpleasant. Green or blue light usually is pleasant. Right? But it may affect different people differently. But still, there is a pleasantness or unpleasantness associated with it, whether it is light or sound. Loud sound is unpleasant. High-pitched sound is unpleasant. Screeching sound is unpleasant. Soft tone, soft drum, this is very pleasant. And low-pitched voice is more pleasant than high-pitched voice. And this is a little warning to ladies. If you happen to have a high-pitched voice, and if you want to go into sales and marketing, train yourself to lower your pitch. Because very high pitch is very irritating, you know. The customer doesn't like to hear this high-pitched noise piercing into their ears. So if you are into sales and marketing, learn to lower the pitch of your voice if you happen to have a high-pitched voice. And politicians have done that very well. Very famous case in the past, former Prime Minister of UK, Margaret Thatcher. I actually have video recording of her when she was a member of parliament. Her voice has a very high pitch. She went for voice training and lowered the pitch of her voice successfully. So when she was elected as Prime Minister, by that time she was campaigning, her voice had a low pitch. So because it's not so unpleasant. And there are people who train themselves. Right? A former front runner for presidency in US, this lady, wife of the ex-president Hillary Clinton, she has a low-pitched voice. You think it's natural? Maybe half of it is, but she went for voice training. Definitely. Her husband is very good at this kind of thing. How to train yourself to project a very positive image. And voice training is one of those things. So, just a simple little tip for all the ladies with high-pitched voice. That's why you see when the husband comes home, the last thing he ever wants to hear is this high-pitched voice going into the ear. That is the last thing a husband ever wants to hear. Okay, so now pleasant or unpleasant feelings will arouse this citta to react. And how does the citta react? The citta reacts by triggering internally a chain reaction, biochemical chain reaction. And this causes hormones to be released, and hormones being released will cause tension in the body. So now the body is feeling tense, and there is a sensation in the body associated with it. So this physical tension in the body, physical experience of discomfort is called stress. Right? Dukkha, stress. And this is really a physiological disturbance which leads us to react in a freeze, fight or flight manner. If it is something unpleasant for the first time ever we experience it, we freeze. We don't know what it is. If it is something we have experienced before, we either want to fight against it, try to get rid of it, or we run away from it so that we are no longer affected by it. Right? So this is really leading to the process called soka and parideva, grief and lamentation. We feel sad about it, now we want to cry. Now we are on the verge of wanting to react to it. So this is really what happens to us. So now we go one step further and look at the second noble truth. How does this affect us then? The origin of suffering, samudaya. Basically, it is talking about tanha. It is this tanha which leads to renewed existence accompanied by delight, lust here and there, and seeking delight and lust here and there. See, when we are affected, we're feeling unhappy, we always look for pleasant experiences to run away from it. Right? I must admit, I'm one of those who did that in my young age. You know, when I'm happy, I have a good appetite. When I get pissed off, I get angry, I'm very sad, I drown my sorrows in food. So I joke with my friends, I call that win-win, you know. So we find ways to escape from the suffering by seeking delight here and there. So in my young age, I was enjoying food to get away from it. But that time, I was not a Buddhist yet. Right? So now that I know better, I you know, in the back of my mind, I wish I hadn't done that, but it's too late. So anyway, this is it. It is this tanha, that emotional reaction that causes, that is the cause of all the suffering. So it is this tanha for sensual pleasures, tanha for non-existence, and tanha for continued existence. So what is tanha for sensual pleasures? That is really called lobha. The condition is called lobha, where you have lust and greed for pleasures, right? Pleasant experience, sensual pleasures, lust and greed for pleasures. This tanha for non-existence basically means you are now angry with something unpleasant. It's called dosa. You have aversion and hatred towards something unpleasant. See, when it is something pleasant, you have lust, and lust eventually turns into greed. How? When you enjoy something pleasant, you find it pleasurable, you like it. What do you do when you like it? You want more. When you take more, not enough, you want some more. So lust turns into greed. In the same way, when it is something unpleasant, aversion turns into hatred. What happens? You begin to avoid it. Aversion means avoiding it, avoidance. You try to avoid it, but you can't always avoid it. It keeps coming back to you. And what happens when it keeps coming back to you? You get angry with it. You become hateful towards it. So aversion turns into hatred. And then the third one, tanha for continued existence. When you're experiencing neutral experience, basically you know there is an experience, you have felt an experience, but it is neutral. So it is neither lobha nor dosa, but at the same time you feel that there is this body. So now you begin to have this moha. Moha is the delusion of a self-centered existence because of the experience that you're receiving through the body. Right? So therefore you have this delusion of a self-centered existence, and this is what is called the three roots, the three evil roots: lobha, dosa, and moha. Very important to understand. The word tanha is, if you use the word craving, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I hope now you understand, you can see more clearly. Tanha is really emotional reaction. And that is what the five hindrances will do to us. The five hindrances will trigger tanha, and this tanha will make us fail to accomplish the goals of our practices, either to keep the precept or to meditate, whatever it is. Right? So moving on, we have these changes going on in the body, and we're feeling these bodily sensations, which is a physiological disturbance. Now what happens? Because of this internal bodily sensation, the citta reacts one more time by triggering the arising of memory, imagination, expectation, and that's where lobha, dosa, moha comes about. This is really the mental reaction. Earlier on, you have the bodily reaction with the hormones being released. Now you have the mental reaction where the mind is disturbed, and when it is disturbed, memory, imagination, expectation arise, and this is mental proliferation. This is where the mind runs away, creating all kinds of ideas and thoughts and whatever. So ruminating, as the psychologists would call it, rumination, right? Or mental proliferation, the mind begins to run away, right? And what happens when that happens, what happens? This mental activity starts to disturb your rational thinking. So the chittas will begin to disturb your mano. Your mano can no longer think clearly. And this is really what is called distress. Distress is mental suffering, mental disturbances, right? Mental disturbances, mental suffering, distress, domanassa. So this is where dukkha and domanassa comes about. Because the Buddha spoke about 5 different levels of suffering. Soka, parideva, which I mentioned earlier on, then dukkha, domanassa, and finally, if we are not able to solve this problem and it gets worse, it drives us crazy, makes us feel depressed, makes us feel angry, we end up committing something which is unwholesome, then we are reaching the point where we are no longer able to control it. That is upayasa, exhaustion or expiration. We may even commit suicide if it is something very, very painful we cannot accept, right? All this is really what emotion is all about. Until about 150 years ago, scientists used to think, oh, emotion is all in the mind, it's all in your mind, that's what emotion is. But 150 years ago, a very famous psychologist, William James, actually described it. Emotion begins in the body. That means it is whatever that we have experienced triggers reactions in the body, and that's how emotions begin. So emotions begin in the body, and then it creates disturbance in the mind. So the emotion actually has 2 dimensions. First, the physiological part, where changes in the body happen first, followed by the psychological part, where the mind gets disturbed, right? And if we are not careful with what we do, when this disturbance arises, we will be controlled by emotion. And this is a verse, I'm going to show you the next verse, which explains this. Now, at this point, I want to point out very importantly, it is very sad. Many translations do not care what is the difference between citta and mano. So they translate the word citta to mind. And this is not Bhante Punnaji's translation. This is from some other translators. I think this is Thanissaro Bhikkhu's translation. Right? I got it from one of the translators, either Thanissaro Bhikkhu or Bhikkhu Bodhi. So basically, they translate all the word citta as mind. Now, if you read this statement here, the world is led around by mind. By mind is dragged here and there. Mind is the one thing that has all under its control. Now, if you read this statement, it gives you some idea, but you're not very sure. I'm going to show you another translation from Bhante Punnaji, where Bhante translated it as emotions dominate the world. Emotions create distress. Emotion is that one thing to which all are spellbound. Does that now make more sense? Is this not clearer? That it is emotion that is controlling us, controlling our behavior, controlling the way we think, the way we act, right? So really, this is what emotion does to us. So bear in mind, one of the saddest things in reading a lot of English books on Buddhism is the translator do not pay attention to whether the Pali word was citta or the Pali word was mano. Now, on a sideline, I also discovered why. I actually was wondering why people don't do that. I discovered why when I started reading a little bit about Abhidhamma. Throughout the entire Abhidhamma, they were using the word citta. Whether the Buddha meant the thinking part or the emotional part, it was still represented with the word citta. So in other words, citta was used throughout the Abhidhamma to refer to, doesn't matter whether it's the cognitive process or the affective process. So basically, the citta was the word that was used throughout the Abhidhamma. So I guess that could be the main reason why many translators did not bother to distinguish or discern or separate the meaning of citta and mano. But it's very important to do this, because the Abhidhamma is not the direct words of the Buddha. Whether he taught it or not taught it, I'm not going to go into that, but it's not his direct words. It was not part of the oral transmission that was handed down before they wrote it down in the Pali Canon. So what we can only go by what is written in the Pali Canon. Very importantly, when you read an English translation of a sutra and it mentions mind, do a little bit of homework to figure out whether he's referring to Citta or Mano. Then you will understand the meaning a bit more, which is like what I have just shown you here. Later on, I will show you another example based on Mano. Then you will know. So how do we overcome this problem? And the Buddha has already described that there is a way to end this, and the way leading to the ending is the Eightfold Way, the supernormal Eightfold Way. Right? So I have put there Bhante Punnaji's translation in bold. Of course, in inverted commas, the popular translation you find in most books. Right? So the first two is harmonious perspective and harmonious orientation. I'm not going to go too deep into Eightfold Way because we are going to go into Five Hindrances. Basically, the first one allows us to understand clearly what is right from wrong, what is good from bad, and in what is described in Dhamma at the initial phase, we gain some initial wisdom, basic wisdom about what is good for us, what is not good for us, what is wholesome, what is unwholesome. And then we want to do something about it. Wanting to do something about it is harmonious orientation. So this equips us with a basic panya, basic wisdom, understanding right from wrong, good from bad, healthy to unhealthy. And then it leads us to practice, where we begin to purify the body. So this next part is the practice that purifies the body. We begin with harmonious speech, where we guard our speech, that we only speak in proper way and not tell lies or make malicious speech or spread gossips and so on. We also act accordingly, that we maintain the precepts, we don't harm living things, right? We don't conduct sexual misconduct, and we don't take things that do not belong to us, and so on. And then we live a life that is healthy and clean and don't hurt anyone or harm anyone in the process, right? So this second part in blue is Sila, the morality or virtuous morality that we use to purify the body. But what is more important now is we're going to talk about the meditation part, and that is in the green part, where we have harmonious exercises, and then we have harmonious attention and harmonious equilibrium. Harmonious exercise is really this Sama Vayama. Sama Vayama is basically the practice of these four harmonious exercises, Chattari Samapadana. Right? These are the four harmonious exercises we need to practice to guard our senses, not to allow new unwholesome experiences to be remembered and so on, right? I'm not going to go too deep into that. I will just run through it. So the first one is the practice of the four harmonious exercises, and then we will be able to fulfill Sama Vayama. So by cultivating and developing these four harmonious exercises, we will fulfill Sama Vayama. The next one is Samasati, and here Sati is really referring to the introspection. That word is commonly translated as mindfulness, but a more accurate word is introspective attention, or introspection, or systematic introspection. Right? So this is really the practice of Satipatthana. It's only by practicing the four focuses of introspective attention that we are able to fulfill Samasati. So developing and cultivating Satipatthana will lead us to the fulfillment of Samasati. And then the third part of this meditation part, this is talking about the practice of the 7 steps to awakening, the Satta Bojjhanga. It's only by practicing the Satta Bojjhanga then are we able to fulfill Samadhi. And this is really the cultivation and development of Satta Bojjhanga by training, and then we are able to fulfill samadhi. Unfortunately, the word samadhi has been translated as concentration. That's why the popular translation is called right concentration. Later on, I'm going to show you why it is not concentration. We're going to do a little exercise later on. So basically these three things deal with meditation, and that's normally where we refer to five hindrances. Then we are referring to five hindrances affecting us during the practice of these various exercises. So very important to also understand that when the Buddha taught meditation, he never separated the teaching of samatha meditation, which is tranquility meditation, and the teaching of Vipassanā meditation, which is insight meditation. The Buddha never separated it as two different sets of teachings, never. The Buddha taught it as one continuous flow, as in here. If you really want to know, then you can see this last one, Satta Bojjhanga, would be representative of the cultivation of insight. Let's take a look at what the Buddha did say. Stages to awakening. This is found in the Anapanasati Sutta. Monks, when mindfulness of breathing is cultivated and developed, it is of great benefit and great reward. It helps eliminate the five hindrances. And there you have it. By practicing mindfulness of breathing, Anapanasati, you can already help to eliminate the five hindrances. It didn't say suppress, it says eliminate. Of course, we begin by suppressing it. Right? By systematically suppression, finally you're able to eliminate it. It's like a tap. A tap which has maybe a faulty washer. You try to close the tap, and then it drips. Drip, 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 drip. So you can't eliminate the drip. So what do? You tighten the tap a little bit more. The drip gets less. Drip, drip, drip. Now you tighten it a little bit more. Drip. After a long time, drip. Finally, when you are able to tighten it enough, there's no more drip. In the same manner, five hindrances arising, what do? You practice relaxation and introspective attention and Anapanasati to suppress it first. Suppressing it adequately over a period of time, eventually after sustained practice and diligent practice and being aware of using this throughout the day, you finally can eliminate it. So in other words, the five hindrances can be eliminated through systematically practice, but you begin by suppressing it. Right? So basically, you begin with Anapanasati, which helps you to suppress five hindrances, but eventually it can eliminate the five hindrances. And what happens next? Anapanasati, when cultivated and developed, leads to fulfillment of the four focuses of introspection. Satipatthana, which is commonly translated as mindfulness. But the four focuses of introspection is a more precise translation. Right? And basically the word Satipatthana really refers to introspective attention. Coming from three root words, Sati, Upa, Tana. Sati is attention. Upa is within, inwards. Tana is to place or to focus. So what does it mean? To focus your attention inwards. That's what Satipatthana means. But of course, during the early days, the Westerners translated this as mindfulness. But actually, it is not about mindfulness. Because when you say mindfulness, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. And in fact, today, mindfulness is a wonderful brand name that earns a lot of people money in the United States. If you tell people you are a mindfulness teacher, you teach mindfulness, you can earn a lot of money. You can have a lot of students who will pay a lot of fees to learn mindfulness from you. Right? So the word mindfulness has been very grossly distorted. They teach mindfulness with so many other things added onto it. But the real teaching of the Buddha in Satipatthana is to bring your attention inwards and focus on four areas of focuses. The first two deals with the body, the next two deals with the mind. Right? And basically it talks about focusing on the activity of the body, the reactions of the body first, and then focusing on how the body feels, the feelings in the body, the Vedana, and then focus on what kind of emotional states arise, what kind of mood or temperament is being aroused. Right? And then finally, the fourth one is, what are the thoughts arising? What are you thinking about? How did you interpret your circumstances? That is the Dhamma part in the mind. So those are the four focuses in Satipatthana. So that's really what Satipatthana is all about, bringing your attention inwards. And then Satipatthana, when cultivated and developed, leads to the fulfillment of 7 steps to awakening, the Satta Bojjhanga. And basically in the Satta Bojjhanga, you begin to become more analytical, right? And with that, you are able to then understand the realities of life, the threefold realities of life, and also then give you a more fuller comprehension of the Four Noble Truths. So Satta Bojjhanga, when cultivated and developed, leads to the fulfillment of full comprehension, panya, and emancipation, liberation, right? Freeing yourself from suffering, vimutti. And at that point, you are at the doorstep of Nibbana. You basically just need to open the door and you're into Nibbana. So this is really what the Buddha said about meditation. And you can see here, the Buddha never separated what is Samatha, what is Vipassana, never. It is later day, a lot of teachers who try to separate it. The Buddha did mention these, but not in teaching it. In the teachings of the Buddha throughout all the sutras, the Buddha never taught them separately. But the Buddha did mention, and I'll show you later on the sutra where the Buddha mentioned these two in a separate way. Let's take a look at it graphically. First, you begin with Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. By the way, I want to point out another misunderstanding. A lot of people have misunderstood Anapanasati as mindfulness of breath. What's the difference between mindfulness of breath and mindfulness of breathing? Mindfulness of breath means you observe the breath. When you're breathing in, you observe the breath as it hits your nostril, how it affects your nostril, and then as it goes into your lungs, and then how it goes through your lungs, and it goes into your abdomen, how it causes your abdomen to rise and fall. That is mindfulness of breath. And a lot of people teach that. But Anapanasati is not about the object of the breath. Anapanasati is about the experience of breathing. By observing the experience of breathing, the process of breathing in a natural way, allowing it to tranquilize the body, allowing it to relax the body. The whole purpose of Anapanasati is really to tranquilize the body and the mind, to bring the body and the mind to a state of perfect stillness. And by observing the process of breathing, it helps you do that, because you are observing a very natural process, not forcing the breathing, just observe the natural breathing that is going on. But unfortunately, there are teachers, I have come across them, that they teach, observe the breath, how it enters your nostril and affects the hair in your nostril, and how it goes into your lungs. Then you are observing something existential. The Buddha's teaching is never existential. The Buddha's teaching is always experiential. So what was the Buddha teaching? The Buddha was teaching you, observe the experience of breathing, not the breath itself. Observing the breath is existential. And if you continue to do that, you will never actually bring your mind and body to that state of stillness, right? Because you will continue to look at what the breath is doing. But the real thing is to observe the process of breathing. Allow that observation to calm, relax your body, calm your mind, tranquilizing body and mind. And then you're able to go into and looking at observing the four focuses of introspection. Introspective attention or introspection, commonly called mindfulness. And then you're able to practice the Satta Bojjhanga, and finally to full comprehension and emancipation. You could say the first two deals mainly with samatha, but in Satipatthana, the second half of it, when you observe the mind, you are already starting to get more understanding of the mental process. You're beginning to understand how process of perception arising. So with that, you're actually beginning to enter into what people will call Vipassanā meditation. Right? So you could say Vipassana begins in the later part of this Satipatthana and then going on to Sattabhujanga. But that is not important, right? It is not important to separate between Samatha and Vipassana. Practice this whole thing as one, because that is what the Buddha taught. The Buddha's teaching in all the sutra was to teach the meditation continuously. He never taught these two separately. Samatha, Vipassana were never taught separately. But he did say that different people will accomplish different benefits. Some will experience samadhi, which is the fruit of samatha meditation. Some will experience panya or insight, that is the fruit of vipassana meditation. But the practice is continuously in this manner. And then of course it's completely fulfilled with the eightfold way. Now the sutra where the Buddha actually mentioned samatha, vipassana separately, it was not in reference to practice. It was actually saying that there are really four kinds of people. One kind will never get any benefits, but the other three kinds, one group will gain the benefit of samadhi. Right? That means tranquility. They will accomplish tranquility. The other group may accomplish only insight, panya. And then the third group will accomplish both samadhi and panya. And the Buddha's advice to the monks and say, those of you who only accomplish samadhi, you should now go and ask those who have accomplished panya, what is the practice? And likewise he says, those of you who have accomplished panya, you should now ask those who have accomplished samadhi, what is the practice? How to practice? And that was what he was saying in this sutra here. Tatiya Samadhi Sutra, Anguttara Nikaya 494. Basically, in a nutshell, samatha meditation is really referring to how to still the citta, bring the citta to a standstill. Notice it is about the citta, not the mind as a whole. It's basically about the citta specifically, and this is about getting rid of the five hindrances, or at least initially suppressing the five hindrances. It is not about objects of focus. It is not about focusing on the breath. It is about focusing on the process, not the object, the experience of breathing. Right? So it's the process that you are focusing on. And Vipassana is about examining sankhara, understanding sankhara. So basically, samatha is about understanding affective process, taming the affective process, whereas Vipassana is about understanding a full comprehension of the mental formation of this cognitive process, the process of perception, how it arises, how this process of perception is arising. So, a quick look at the sutra. What is samatha? This is mentioned in the sutra specifically, where using the analogy of, say, if I were to talk about the mind, maybe it's a bit harder to picturize. But picture something, yourself running. Let's say you're running. How can you bring your activity of running to a perfect stillness? Right? So you're running. What do you need to do? So while running, the first thing you must do is you stop running. You stand. Right? And when you're standing, if you want to bring your whole body and mind to perfect stillness, what's the next thing you need to do? You sit down, right? Because when you're standing, your weight is still being carried by your feet. So your feet is carrying your entire body weight. That is tension. Now if you want to bring it to the next level of stillness, what do? You sit down. When you sit down, you have at least rested the lower half of your body, and then only the upper part, your torso, the weight is still carried by your backbone. Right? And then what's the next thing you do? If you want to bring the whole body to a perfect stillness where you no longer have tension, you lie down. So therefore it is running to a stop standing position, standing to a sitting position, sitting to a lying position. Imagine that process. Then you can understand this better. Now, how do you still the mind? How do you still the Citta? First, you get the Citta to come to a stand. And steady the Citta so that the Citta stands. And then you bring the Citta to sit properly. And that is settling down the Citta. Now settling down. And then the third one is unifying it. Then you begin to lie down. Right? And finally, when they are together, you have a unified mind, fully composed. And then you would have a perfect stillness. Notice that in this sutra, it is always referring to Citta. Unfortunately, a lot of people who translate this sutra translate the word Citta to the word mind. And then it becomes difficult to understand, what are you trying to accomplish with your mind? It is really your emotion. Right? This is about taming the emotion. This is how we can get rid of the 5 hindrances. So this is about Samatha. Vipassana is basically about Sankhara, observing and comprehending Sankhara. I won't go much further into Vipassana because that's not what I'm really focused on. So Vipassana here comes from the root word V, which means distinct or clear, separating, able to separate into two things or different things, distinct or discerning. And then Passana means seeing, observing, being able to comprehend, observe for the purpose of comprehending. So this is Vipassana. And basically the definition is that Samatha will lead to the fruit of Samadhi, which is stillness of mind, like stilling of Citta, settling it, calming it, tranquilizing it. This will bring it to a state of mental equilibrium. And basically this stillness of mind is Samadhi, cognitive consonance, where the mind is completely unified between Mano and Citta. Because when Citta is aroused, it is disturbing Mano. Now you have the two minds unified as one. The two are behaving as one. So you no longer have disturbances. No more shaking in the mind. So that is Samadhi, unified mind, and this is stillness of mind. Here is mind because it's both Mano and Citta together. But basically it's about bringing Citta to a state of stillness. So unified mind. So that's really the fruit of Samatha meditation, tranquility meditation, not concentration meditation. I'll show you later on. Vipassana is about leading to the fruit of Panya, right? Distinct, discerning, separating between one and the other, and Passana, comprehend, and this is basically culminating in distinct seeing, leading to Panya. Now, Samadhi or Samatha are often translated as concentration. And because the Westerners don't understand it. Because basically it means observing the breath, don't take your attention away. And it is this, don't take your attention away, that people misunderstand concentration. There's a big difference. Don't take your attention away is one thing. Concentration is another thing. Concentration is an effort. You need to force yourself to focus. That is concentration. And later on I'll show you. So it's really not concentration. It is stillness of mind. And when you're able to accomplish that and suppress the 5 hindrances, at least on a temporary basis, you will begin to experience jhana. And jhana is basically the ecstasy of this samatha, practice of samatha. And therefore, it is really a withdrawal of this affective process, your citta, bringing the citta to a perfect stillness. So it begins with experiencing the first jhana, where you have the 5 constituents, and basically it's vitaka, vichara, that is the inquiry and inference going on. This is some kind of thinking going on. And then piti, which is the mental contentment, or the cognitive contentment or cognitive satisfaction. And then sukha, which is the comfort of the body. And then finally ekagata, and that is the cognitive consonance, the mind being unified as one, not separated or torn between two. So it's really only one single mind. No separation between citta or mano anymore. It's combined, unified. When that happens and you're able to withdraw from thinking, then you will experience a second jhana, and where you will have the experience of piti, sukha and ekagata. And if you are able to withdraw from piti, it will lead you to the third jhana, where you have sukha and ekagata, and finally withdrawing from sukha, it leads you to perfect stillness of mind, ekagata, cognitive consonance, where the two minds are one in perfect harmony, perfect stillness. This is the opposite of dissonance, cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is one of the 5 hindrances. We're going to touch on that in a moment. So basically this is about the jhana. The purpose of this sharing is not so much about going into explaining about the jhana, because if you're able to suppress the 5 hindrances, even on a temporary basis, suppressing the 5 hindrances, you will be on the threshold of experiencing the jhana. And you will know it when you experience it. Nobody can describe to you what jhana is like. You will experience it when you're able to suppress the 5 hindrances, and you will know it when you experience it. But you have to suppress the 5 hindrances. So what are the 5 hindrances? First is called kamachanda, which is when you have a wish or a desire for some sensual pleasures. Second is vyapada. I'm going to go into each one in a little bit detail in a moment. So, second one is vyapada. This is about your anger and hatred towards something which is unpleasant. Then the third one is about tina mida, which is really this sluggishness or laziness or drowsiness of the mind, right? Or in the body also. And then udacha kukucha, which is really about the agitation and restlessness, as well as the anxiety and the worry. Both tina mida and udacha kukucha actually have 2 parts each. I'm going to go into detail in a moment. And then of course vichikicha, which is cognitive dissonance, the mind being torn. Unfortunately, the word tina mida is translated as sloth and torpor. Sloth and torpor, a lot of people have difficulty understanding. What is sloth and torpor? It suggests purely laziness, but it's not all laziness. It is the sluggishness, the lethargy and the drowsiness. Not necessarily because you're lazy, right? Because other factors. So I'm going to explain that. Then vichikicha unfortunately has been translated as skeptical doubt. It is not. It is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance means the mind being torn in 2 directions. Dissonance means being torn apart. Right? That is dissonance. Your mind is being torn apart. That is cognitive dissonance, not skeptical doubt. I'll come to that in a moment. Now, in order to help us overcome the 5 hindrances, we have to use our thinking mind. So that when we meditate, we bring the emotional mind to a stillness by not allowing anything to arouse our emotion. And doing that, we do that simply by using the power of our thinking mind to observe the breathing, and by observing the process of breathing, not the breath, but the process of breathing that can help us tranquilize the body and the mind and bring it to a stillness. And this can only be accomplished by a certain level of willpower, that we want to now observe and not take our attention away from the process of breathing. Do not take the attention away from the process of breathing. So this use of willpower is mano. Now again, I'm going to show you this translation from Acharya Buddha Rakita, where this first verse of Dhammapada has been translated to mind. Mano is translated to the word mind, and it is a little bit daunting trying to understand what it is saying. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is the chief. They are all mind route. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows like the wheel that follows the feet of the ox. Now this is common translation, which only translates mano to mind without distinguishing what mano is. Here is Bhante Punnaji's translation, where he clearly distinguishes that mano is really cognition, our thinking. And cognition can help us cultivate and bring about this energy. This is this willful energy called viriya. Right? It is through the application of this energetic mental process that can help us overcome or suppress the five hindrances. Cognition precedes all experience. Cognition predominates. Cognition creates our realities. With destructive cognition, if we speak or act, pain follows us like the wheel that follows the drawer of the cart. So it's really cognition here. So in other words, Dhammapada verse number 1 is a very powerful verse that basically teaches us the use of our rational thinking, the use of our intelligence, our intellect can help us overcome a lot of difficulties in life. So let's now take a look at each hindrance and how we can use the mano to overcome each hindrance. Kamachanda, the desire or wish for sensual pleasures. Basically, it is any wish for something pleasant is kamachanda. So even when you're sitting there, okay, if you're wishing, oh, I love durian, how I wish I can have durian after meditation, that is kamachanda. But there is also a very subtle form of kamachanda. You're sitting there and then you're feeling some pain in your legs, feeling a bit of discomfort. Instead of doing something about it, you start to think, how I wish it would go away. That wishing, that is also a form, a very subtle form of kamachanda, having a wish, right? So any kind of wish for something pleasant is kamachanda. Now you have to be very careful. Here it's very clearly mentioned here. I researched this a bit and I come to this understanding. Kamachanda is distinguished from unwholesome lobha, because lobha comes with clinging and greed, right? So lobha comes from the root word lut. Lut means to cling, to attach, to have greed. So basically kamachanda does not necessarily lead to greed, but it can, right? But basically it is a wish, a desire for something pleasant. So that's kamachanda. Because the word chanda from chad means to wish for, right? So kama is pleasures, to wish for something pleasant. So wishing for a pleasant and comfortable experience itself is also kamachanda. So make no wishes when you meditate. Don't sit down and start to say, how I wish I can experience jhana. Wow. Be careful, because you know why? I am not including it in this talk, but that wish can lead to hallucination and lead to self-hypnosis. You begin to hallucinate the experience of jhana, and then you think you have experienced jhana. Be careful what you wish for when you meditate. The solution: have no wishes. Zero. Make no wish. Simple as that. Now, how can we overcome the wish or desire for pleasures when it arises in our mind? We need to change the picture. The moment it arises, we need to change our picture. Changing the picture means now to change the mind, to observe something else which is free from arousal of lust or desires. In fact, there are a few very useful meditation that Bhante Punnaji has prescribed. The first one is Asubha Bhāvanā, which is meditation on the repulsiveness of the body. Once you begin to understand, there are these 32 parts of the body, how repulsive they are. You're looking at the phlegm, the saliva, the juice, the this and the that, the gut. When you begin to understand how repulsive it is, you no longer have desire for sexual wishes and things like that. This is very helpful for people with unwholesome sexual desires. Asubha meditation is the best one. So maybe they should teach this in prison to all the rapists. Asubha meditation. Another one is also to meditate on decaying corpse. Kalebara Bhavana. Now don't worry, all this meditation are in written form. I will show you the link at the end of this presentation where you can now then take a picture and download those documents to practice this meditation. And of course the third one, to help you relax your mind, calm it away from lust, is Anapanasati, right? Mindfulness of breathing, right? So that is what this is about. Next, Vyapada, anger or hatred towards displeasures. What happens? Right. It arises from self-centeredness, because you have this selfishness in you. I want this, I want that. And when you don't get what you want, you begin to get angry with it. And do be aware, and this is something I have also researched and I have also understood it personally. Kamachanda, when you have lust for something, kamachanda is always accompanied by a very latent form of vyapada. Why? Because when we have kamachanda, we wish for something pleasant and we also want to protect it. We want to get it, so we want to protect and safeguard the pleasurable experience. Now, that can also lead to vyapada, because by wanting to safeguard it, when you feel that there is anyone threatening you from getting it, you get angry with that person or with the condition. That is vyapada. So in other words, even in kamachanda, there is a very latent form of vyapada going on. So this is basically arising as a result of selfishness, thinking of self-centeredness. So when there is vyapada, there is no loving kindness. You don't have universal benevolence, no compassion to other beings, no understanding of anicca, dukkha, anatta. What can you do about it? Change the picture, but this time change the picture to the one which is filled with universal benevolence and goodwill, free from arousal of anger, hatred and selfishness. Goodwill is the best thing to do to overcome ill will, right? Goodwill is the best thing to do, to practice to overcome ill will. Metta Bhāvanā, this is goodwill meditation, or some call it loving kindness meditation. So it's meditation on universal benevolence. In fact, this meditation developed by Bhante Punnaji comes with the full Brahma Vihara, which is Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha, and that is beginning with universal benevolence. It leads to a deeper form of goodwill, and that is Karuna, or compassion, and then it leads to selfless happiness, that is Mudita, and finally leads to a state of mental equilibrium, Upekkha. And very important to understand also in this meditation, it is describing that compassion can be directed at 5 levels of discomfort and 5 levels of comfort. Right? I'll show that in a moment. Meanwhile, then one more meditation you can use to help you overcome vyapada, that is Tilakkhana Bhāvanā. Right? Tilakkhana Bhāvanā, the meditation on threefold realities of life. Not many people are taking picture of this. I'm just wondering. 5 levels of discomfort. Compassion can be directed at 5 levels of discomfort. First one, sympathy for those who have lost whatever they have, either people or things, right? So they have experienced losses in life. You have to feel for them, empathize with them, and realize that there is something, maybe something you can do about it. Sympathy for those who have lost their self-esteem, right? Their self-dignity, right? Loss of position in society, suffering from inferiority complex, ego being challenged, and so on. Sympathy for beings in the human realm, where they are in uncomfortable conditions, in prisons, hospitals, refugee camps, and those subject to starvation, suppression, oppression, right? Famine, and so on. Sympathy for others, less privileged beings in other lower realms, animals, hungry ghosts, or beings in hells, right? And you may not even know about. So do sympathize for those beings there. And of course, number 5 is sympathy for those who are worrying or repenting for their own misdeeds in the past. Right? So these are the 5 levels of discomfort, and the 5 levels of comfort. Right? Compassion can be directed at 5 levels of comfort. Sympathy for those who have gained many things. So in other words, we must also rejoice in other people's success and happiness. Those who have earned something or gained something they wish for. Those who have gained their self-esteem, now they feel better about themselves. Those who have become more privileged, right, able to get out of unhappiness or discomfort, and those who are more privileged in heavens, the higher realms. And also sympathy for those who are enjoying freedom from guilt or mental torment or shame or so on. And basically, compassion is not merely sympathetic resonance for others' losses and sorrow, but also sympathetic rejoicing of others' success and happiness. So this is really about the Vyapara part, where you practice this Metta Bhavana. Now, Tina Mida. Tina. First, we look at Tina. There are two parts, right? Tina is sluggishness of the mind. Comes from the root word te, which means to shrink, and na means dullness. So basically, it's the sluggishness of the mind withdrawing, the mind becoming reluctant, no longer want to do something. The reluctance. Now, this could be the result of laziness, or could be the result of some kind of depressive mood. Right? Can also be depression that leads to that. And this is the opposite of virya. So in other words, the remedy for tina is virya. Virya is this willful energy or willpower to act from the power of your mano. Virya comes from your mano. Then now I want to do something. I want to get out of this rut. I want to stay awake. I don't want to fall asleep. Right? There is the energy to do that. Right? Not just the wish for it, but the energy to do it. And basically, it is also translated as sloth, unfortunately. Tina is translated as laziness. As you can see, it may or may not be the result of laziness. It could be the result of depression. Right? People are in depressive moods. Mida is lethargy or drowsiness from the root word mit, which means to be inactive or incapable of acting, inert. Inactivity or weakness of the body, unable to do it. Here it also relates a little bit to the body, right? And also translated as torpor, which is inactivity or indifference. And both tina and mida are always used in conjunction. Where there is tina and mida, there is no virya, right? So therefore, the important thing now is to re-energize your virya. Re-energize and awaken. To re-energize the mind to become inspired or motivated, awaken to take action. And a good meditation practice, surprisingly, is meditation on death. Knowing that life is short, that we don't have that much time left to cultivate ourselves, to develop our mind and our body, right? To purify. Therefore, there's no time left, no time to waste. So meditation on death will help us realize there's no time to waste. So that is you could also meditate on Tilakkhana, the threefold realities of life, and so on. Uddacca, right? Mida, okay, that is tina mida. Now uddacca, agitation and restlessness. Uddacca comes from the root word u, which means over. That du means to tremble, to shake, to become excited. So overexcited. Uddacca simply literally means over excitement or over arousal, to the point that you become confused, restless state of mind. Often pertains to the future. Usually when used in conjunction with five hindrances, uddacca normally refers to future situation. That you are now worried about what's going to happen next. You are uncertain about the future. You become overly excited of what could happen. Kukucca is anxiety and worry. And it comes from the root word ku, which means evil that is done. Kata, which means the good that is not done. Basically, you're worried about the past. This relates to the past. Kukucca is sometimes translated as remorse over evil that is done, or remorse over the good that is not done. Something you've done wrong in the past, or something which you should have done but you failed to do. Right? You failed to take care of your mother properly when she was ill, and finally she passed away. Right? So that is also a kind of kukucca in this sense. Right? And when used together with uddacca, usually kukucca refers to the past only. And how can we overcome that? By bringing the mind to a state of rest and peace. Restful, peaceful mind. Free from restlessness, arousal of anxiety, and the best meditation practice is Anapanasati, using mindfulness of breathing to tranquilize the body and calm the mind. And also you can meditate on Tilakkhana Bhāvanā, which is meditation on threefold realities of life, to realize that things arise and fade away, anicca. We cannot get excited or anxious over things because they come and go. Good things will come, good things will go. Bad things will come, bad things will go. What arises vanishes eventually. So the good that we experience may not last. The bad that is hurting us may not last, right? So that is anicca, and then dukkha, anatta, right? So this is kukucca. Now come cognitive dissonance, vicikicca. Vicikicca often translated as skeptical doubt. What is cognitive dissonance? It's when the mind is torn in two directions. One is feeling, right? The mental part is the emotional part, the feeling part. And then the other one is the reasoning, the thinking part. The reasoning, what is the right, what is wrong. And what happens is when feelings and reasoning are pulling in opposite direction, this is a condition called cognitive dissonance. The mind is being torn apart. Now, if you were to be faced with a situation where you have to decide whether to do this, consciously know that you're not supposed to do this, while on the other hand, your emotions feel that, oh, you like it so much, right? Example, a very successful manager in the office, right, ends up with a secretary, very beautiful. Even though he's married, he knows that he shouldn't be having an affair with his secretary, but he's so attracted to her that, he forgets the fact that he has vowed never to engage in sexual misconduct if he's a good Buddhist, but he still engages in a relationship with the secretary. So this is an example. So when a person is faced with these two, feeling, which is emotional, or reasoning, which is cognitive, thinking, intellectual, which one wins most of the time? Emotion wins or intellect wins? Which one? Emotion. 9 out of 10 times. Don't be too hard on yourself. It happens to even the best of us. And usually we automatically react according to feeling. And then we use our intelligence to justify our action. And that's wonderful human intelligence. We don't use the intelligence to decide what to do. We use the intelligence to justify the wrong that we're doing. Right? Example. You are laying in bed, aircon not working very well, and then mosquito comes. You chase it away. You chase it away. You chase. After 10 times, what do you think you're going to do? You have taken the 5 precepts. The first one, Panatipata Veramani. And what have you just done? You just killed a mosquito. Poor mosquito. Right? You know you have taken the 5 precepts. Knowing you've taken the 5 precepts is reasoning. You know that. Intellect. Your thinking mind tells you that. But your body feels uncomfortable because of the mosquito. You get disturbed. Finally, you really want to get rid of it. And the only way to get rid of it is to give it a good clap. Right? And then your emotion takes over. Right? And then you make the excuse, oh, this one is Aedes mosquito. I kill so many of them so they won't spread dengue fever in this area. Right? I've heard people say that. Oh, I'm spraying all the mosquito because they're spreading dengue fever. Okay. So now let's take a look at why is it that emotion wins? I'm going to show you very quickly what the scientists have to say about it. Why emotion wins when we are faced with that. It is all inside the brain. There is one part of the brain in the front which is our thinking brain, called the prefrontal cortex. The real thinking part is right behind the eyebrow, prefrontal cortex. The whole one, frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex. That is the real thinking part. Just a little part of it there. And then deep inside is the emotional brain. The center of it, the command center of emotional brain is amygdala. That is the amygdala which is responsible for your emotional arousal. When it see, hear, smell, taste something that it is unpleasant or whatever, it reacts. Right? So let's see what the scientists have to say about this.
4, 3, 2, 1, time!
And when we try to control them,
we start a tug of war between our brain's oldest and newest parts. While ancient structures like the amygdala respond to threats by trying to turn our anger or fear on, it's newer structures, such as the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, that try to turn them off. It's the tug of war between these two systems that gives rise to our emotions. At New York University, neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux has studied how the amygdala and the cortex shape our emotional responses. You know more about the amygdala than anybody alive, and you still can't control yours.
No.
Why?
Now, there's an interesting thing, again, that has to do with the wiring of the brain. This is, if we could just look at it here. So this is the human brain inside a skull. And the prefrontal cortex is here in the front, right behind your forehead. And that is the newest part of the brain. This is where we make our decisions. This is where we plan for the future and strategize. The lateral prefrontal cortex has no connectivity with the amygdala. The amygdala has superhighways to talk to the cortex, but the prefrontal cortex has only back roads and side streets to get to the amygdala. And therefore, it is unable to tell the amygdala, cool it.
But why are there no connections?
We're in the process of evolving as we speak, and those connections have not been put in yet. This thing was built to do fancy things cognitively, not necessarily to control our emotions.
Our thinking brain is built to do fancy things cognitively. What are fancy things cognitively? Inventing the fan, the light, the aircon, the atomic bomb, whatever, nuclear weapons, right? So that's what the thinking brain is evolved to do. Not necessarily to control the emotion, but what happens is in the emotional command center, the amygdala has very strong connections going to the thinking brain. So that when the amygdala is aroused, our emotions are aroused, it sends a lot of messages to the thinking brain and disturbing the thinking brain. So your thinking brain can no longer think rationally. Your thinking brain can no longer make good judgment because it is getting a lot of disturbing messages coming from your emotional brain. And at the same time, the thinking brain is not strong enough to go back to control it, right? Because of very weak connections going back. And because of that, and that is the result of evolution. These connections have not been put in yet from the process of evolution. So that is really what's going on. So that's vicikicca, cognitive dissonance, which is perplexity, skepticism, confusion, indecision, torn between reasoning and feelings, destabilizing and perplexing because it destabilizes us. It makes us unable to decide, and we may even make the wrong decisions. It vacillates between one view and another. Also, it leads to mistrust, disbelief, stubbornness to accept reason, or lacking in confidence. And this is possibly the reason why it is often misunderstood as doubt, lacking in confidence, as a result of the mind being torn between two worlds. So the real meaning of vicikicca is really that the mind being torn between two worlds. V means separating between two, discerning between two. Cikicca means finding the solution, finding a remedy. So you're torn between finding the answer, right? How can we overcome that? That is by cultivating discerning, rational, stable, confident mind, free from vacillation and perplexity, by practicing the Tilakkhana Bhāvanā, which is meditation on the threefold nature of existence, and also very important practice here, a very helpful one called Anapanasati, recollection meditation. And that is meditation on the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. And also we can meditate on what's happening with ourselves and also helping ourselves to cultivate good thoughts. So this is really how we can overcome, we learn to suppress the five hindrances by practicing these meditations. The way to overcome all this suffering is to practice the middle way. The middle way is what the Buddha explained. Actually, the Buddha talked about the middle way before he started talking about the Four Noble Truths in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra. A lot of people don't realize that. But the first thing he taught was not the Four Noble Truths, it was the middle way. He mentioned about the middle way where he says, first, we are indulging in sensual pleasures. And then the other extreme we should avoid is self-torment, forcing ourselves not to indulge in sensual pleasures. So the first one is emotional reaction to sensual feelings. We are reacting to any sensual feelings. The other extreme is forceful effort to restrain our emotion. Both will bring us a lot of suffering. Both will bring you to the five hindrances. How? When you begin to react to sensual feelings, you are experiencing the first two. You're experiencing kamachanda and vyapada. When you try to force yourself not to react to any temptations or whatever by forceful effort, you are then ending up getting either very tired and lethargic, that is tina mida, or you get very restless, and that is udacha kukucha. Either way, it will bring you a lot of suffering, right? So toggling between these two, you begin to become confused. Should I indulge or should I restrain? Should I indulge or should I restrain? So your mind is being torn apart, and that's vicikicca. So this is really what these five hindrances can do to you, even in daily life. This is daily life. This is not about meditation. This is about daily life. So what can we do? We practice the middle way. And what is the middle way? Thanks to Bhante, I have learned the middle way. At first I was wondering, what is the middle way? Oh, the middle way, maybe a little bit of indulgence, a little bit of restraint is the middle way. No, that is not the middle way. The middle way is the third way. And I have expanded on this a little bit. The middle way is really conscious relaxation. That means learn how to relax. Practice Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, not mindfulness of breath. And then bring your attention inwards. Practice Satipatthana, introspective attention inwards. And finally, you can then accomplish this mental equilibrium, samadhi. Right? You will now, that this can be explained fully through the Eightfold Way. So that is really what the middle way can do for you, right? So conscious relaxation simply means when you experience anything that arouses your emotions, don't react. Do not react to it. Pause and relax. Pause so that you can now consciously release the tension that that is happening in your body. Release the tension. Calm the mind first. Pause and then relax by breathing. Right? When you are able to do that, then you begin to bring your attention inwards. Right? Gently bring attention inwards. Mindfully observe your bodily and your mental activities. What's going on? Introspection. How is my body feeling? Why am I reacting like that in the body? And then my mind, what emotional states are arising, and how did I interpret what I have experienced? And finally, bring the mind to a state of mental equilibrium. And by doing that, you can still the mind. And free from emotional arousal and excitement, you can learn to practice suppressing the five hindrances, and this continuous suppression of five hindrances over a period of time eventually leads to full abandoning of the five hindrances. When you're able to fully abandon the five hindrances, you have accomplished a very high degree of success. So I hope this has been helpful. All the links are here. So now if you're interested, quickly take a snapshot and you can download all these things. I have added one since our meditation class. I have added one more, which is Anusati, the last one, number 9. Number 8 and number 9. I've added them. So Anusati, which is the meditation on the triple gem plus oneself plus cultivation of good thoughts. All these are taken from the Sri Lanka edition. Right? So